For the record, continuation of State of Tennessee versus Tremaine Wilbourn. Mr. Wilbourn is present. All trial counsel are present. We're taking a recess. As the State of Tennessee had indicated, they would make a conditional offer in this case of life without the possibility of parole consecutive federal sentence, and Mr. Wilbourn withdrawing all appeals in this case and the federal court. Members and family members has rejected that conditional offer. So the state is not able to make that offer to Mr. Wilbourn. Even though Mr. Wilbourn indicated he would accept it if it were made, and the family has decided not to accept that recommendation. So this court will in fact proceed with a sentencing hearing. States, we have planned to present mitigation evidence in this case. Oh, sorry, I apologize. Taking impact evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
And I'm required to take that outside of the presence of the jury, and State, you may proceed with an offer of proof outside of the presence of the jury.
You know, we had one issue. There had not been, I'm not sure if there had been a definitive ruling about Mr. Turner's testimony. Looking back over Mr. Turner's report, it is the state's position, even though I know that the rules are somewhat more lax with regard to the sentencing phase of this trial, it's the state's position that there is no nexus, particularly between the testimony that he intends to offer and the defendant, which makes the relevance of that testimony incredibly limited. In addition to that, he does not diagnose the defendant with a mental disease or defect. Additionally, he says that the issue that he's talking about is based on what he calls race-based trauma, and he says that that is not a recognized disorder or disease by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. His conclusion and opinions on this issue are based upon things that he has reviewed. His opinions that he has applied to those articles or studies that he has reviewed have not been peer-reviewed. His conclusions are based upon speculation. He says numerous times throughout this report that the defendant may have symptoms of PTSD. He does not diagnose the defendant with anything. He does not conclusively say that these symptoms that the defendant may have are related in any way to any kind of interaction he had with police. He repeatedly says may have had these interactions, might have, that these, he also repeatedly says that this theory about race-based trauma needs additional study, and that it is in fact at this point just a theory, has not been accepted by the scientific community, and that it has not again been accepted by the DSM. He additionally he states that he cannot say for sure that the defendant suffers from race-based trauma. He says it might lead to certain symptoms. He also says that his research is based on other people's psychological studies, that it remains unclear whether these circumstances lead to trauma. There is nothing specific in his report and nothing that points to specific instances that he can talk about with regard to the defendant in this case. Even with the more lax rules that may apply to this type of proceeding, the state would submit that this does not meet, one, the general relevancy requirements for 401, because the relevant determinations for this proceeding have to do with the, again, he states in his report it's difficult to identify under what circumstances individuals will develop race-related stress. There's no documentation provided to confirm or deny that these symptoms that the defendant experiences were the result of racial incidents. Anything that he attributes to potential racial incidents, he said, was reported to him by the defendant following Mr. And again, he specifically says in numerous instances that these may have affected, might have, that he cannot be sure that any sort of symptoms that he's identified in the defendant have been attributed to incidents that he's had with police. And it's our understanding that he's never even seen or met the defendant in this case. I think it's highly prejudicial and improper to allow this type of testimony, even in this phase of the case. It does not meet 702 and 703. There's, again, no nexus between a material issue in this case because you cannot connect any of this testimony directly to the defendant. There are some additional materials he cites in his report, which we asked for, I believe, at the beginning of trial and still have not received. There's some incidents he outlines with regard to incidents involving the defendant's family. We asked for that material. We've never received that material to this day. And under 703, this testimony should be disallowed if the underlying facts and data lack trustworthiness. There's nothing trustworthy about this. Again, he clearly states over and over again, this is a theory that is not tested. This is a theory that is still under peer review. This is a theory that is not recognized by the medical community. This is a theory based on might haves and could haves. And under those circumstances, and without it being linked to specific things regarding this defendant, the state submits it should not be admitted.
And for the record, what I've ruled on, what I've continued to rule on is that the court will allow Mr. Gangley to make an offer of proof as to what Dr. Turner's, Erlanger, E-R-L-A-N-G-E-R, Turner, Ph.D. in clinical psychology. The court cannot rule on the admissibility of evidence without having an offer of proof made as to what exactly that testimony would be or what the proposed testimony is. And it is a sentencing hearing on the capital murder case, and the rules of evidence are, for lack of a better word, relaxed. But it still has to have some error and some indicia of relevancy, and also has to have, in order to be expert testimony, 702 does have to be complied with. Person qualifies as an expert. Those expert testimony is in fact admissible if it meets certain circumstances, and under the McDaniel, MCDANIEL, and other tests that are applied in Tennessee, which is why we held a ruling on this until a proper tender is made to the courts. And at the appropriate time, once the tender is made, so what that testimony is, whether or not it is in fact has been subject to peer review, tested, and the methodology was used in whatever opinion has been offered, whether there's a potential rate for error, whether or not it is generally accepted in the scientific community, and whether or not the expert research has been conducted independent of litigation. Those are the findings that the court has to make pursuant to McDaniel, MC, capital DANIEL, versus CS in California, SS in Sam, X as the xylophone, transportation. Citation is 955 Southwest 2nd, page 257. 1997 Tennessee Supreme Court opinion and expert testimony, if in fact meets those qualifications. It also meets the qualifications pursuant to Hall, H-A-L-L versus State. And I will put that citation on the record shortly. The court will conduct a hearing outside of the presence of juror, and I told Mr. Gangley that I would allow him, Ms. Hall, Ms. Paston to make an offer of proof as to exactly what that testimony is before the court will allow Dr. Turner to testify in front of a jury, and with all awareness that this is in fact a capital murder case and that sentencing as far as mitigating factors, rules of evidence are substantially relaxed to sentencing on the capital case, it still has to meet a minimal threshold of admissibility before the court can and will in fact allow that testimony to be testify to in front of a jury, and before Dr. Turner testifies in front of the jury, I will conduct the jury out hearing to make a determination as to whether or not it's relevant, whether or not it's admissible, and whether or not it qualifies under the McDaniel case and under States versus Hall, 958 Southwest 2nd, page 679, also 1997 Tennessee Supreme Court opinion. So that's the ruling the court has made, and at the appropriate time, before Ms. Gangula, Ms. Hall, or Ms. Ashley calls Dr. Turner, this court will in fact conduct a jury out here and make a determination as to whether or not any purported testimony is in fact admissible. State, you have significant impact that you want to present outside of the presence of the jury.
Yes, Your Honor. Statement called Ron Bolton.
Mr. Bolton.
Bolton.
Good afternoon, sir. Raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you present in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, sir. And have a seat here, please. Bolton, watch yourself, please, sir. You heard me, please.
You say your first and your last name is spelled out very well.
First name is Brian, B-R-I-A-N. My last name is Bolton, B-O-L-T-O-N.
And Mr. Bolton, how do you know Sean Bolton?
Sean and I were brothers, same mother, same father, grew up together.
And how old was Sean when he was killed?
Sean was 33 because he was killed 6 or 7 days before his 34th birthday.
When was his birthday event?
August 7th.
And did Sean have plans for his birthday on the 7th?
He did. His girlfriend at the time had found out that he had never really been on a date to a really fancy restaurant, so she decided that she was going to treat him to a nice dinner at Folks Folly for his birthday.
And in honor of that plan that she had, did your family do something special?
Yes, when I heard her tell me that, she told me that, I told her that I would gladly step in for my brother, that I would buy her dinner there at Folks Folly, and I invited all my family to come with us. So we all sat down on my brother's birthday and remembered him at a fancy dinner, and that is something that we still do every year. As on his birthday, some of us still get together and just have a nice meal and share stories and reminisce about my brother.
Were you older or younger than John?
He is my smaller, bigger brother, so he was 2 years older than me.
And part of I've explained to you that we have to talk about in this part of the hearing before we talk to the jury is the impact that the loss of your brother had on you and your family.
Yes.
Can you talk about that and what impact losing Sean had to your family?
It's fully describe it or to gather all my thoughts at once. I know my mother found out about my brother's death while she was at work.
Being told you're a little soft-spoken, can you kind of raise your voice a little bit?
Yes. My mother was a nurse at the time, and she was working on the night of August 1st, 2015, when my brother was murdered. And she, like everybody else in my family, found out about it by watching the news media and saw his picture being broadcast everywhere with the wrong name, with the wrong marital status, and that he had children, just a lot of wrong information. So there was a lot of uncertainty, and it turned out that they just got everything wrong except for the picture. And my mother has not been able to continue to work since that day as a nurse when she was about to place an IV. She can't work anymore. I think a lot of us have become sort of hypervigilant in a way that we weren't before because of somebody could kill my brother, what could they do to us when he was a former Marine as well as a police officer?
And was there a tragedy that occurred in your family afterwards that particularly impacted you, not having Sean there with you?
Yes, that would be the birth and the death of my daughter. And that my daughter was born with a heart condition called tetralogy of Fallot. It was a very serious condition, and I know that my wife and I spent a lot of time in the hospital with our daughter, and I know that my brother would have been there with us every single day, doing everything he could to help us, and whatever we needed, he would have been there right beside us, doing everything that he possibly could. And I know that more than anything, he would have been there with us the day that she passed. And that is something that I wish could have happened. I wish my brother had been there with me through all of that.
What did being a police mean to Sean?
Sean loved being a police officer. He loved the city of Memphis, and he loved serving the city of Memphis. I know my Uncle Al, who's sitting in the back, had, when we were little kids, he shared a story about how he was a police officer as well as an EMT. He had saved somebody's life, and he showed us the news clippings of the news article about it. And that's something that really interested both of us. And I know that my brother became very interested in becoming a police officer at a very young age because of that. And
After he was also a Marine?
he was. My father was a Marine. My grandfather on my mother's side was a Marine as well. And he wanted to serve his country and follow in their footsteps.
Can you tell me how it was that Sean came to be a gunner?
He, for a period of time in the Marine Corps, I know he was the machine gunner. He carried the SAW, the squad automatic weapon. And the story that I heard was that one day before their deployment to Iraq, his company, platoon, his unit was exercising, jogging, running through the streets of Memphis. And what I heard was that the machine gunner passed out because he couldn't stand the heat as well as carry the machine gun. So my brother just went over and picked it up and started carrying it. And apparently once you pass out with it, you don't get it back. So that's how my brother became the machine gunner of his squad.
Did he have any other military service besides being a Marine?
Yes, not a lot of people know that after Sean was honorably discharged from the Marine Corps as a sergeant, he decided to continue serving his country, and he joined the National Guard. I believe it was a National Guard unit out of Hernando, Mississippi.
After Sean died, did you hear from people in the community about the impact that he had as an officer?
Yes. At his funeral, specifically at the visitation the night before the funeral, the power went out at Hope Presbyterian Church, and they came up to me, and the funeral director came up to me and told me that I had to go stand and greet everybody because they couldn't go down and visit Sean safely because the auditorium had no power, no lights. So we sat there, or I stood there and shook countless hands and heard countless stories. The few that stood out to me, one was a group of, I believe, nurses from St. Jude came up to us and told us how my brother regularly gave blood or plasma platelets at St. Jude, and that he was such a regular contributor that when they did not hear from him or see him when they expected him, they would actually contact him and ask him where he was and told him that they needed him, and he would go right away and donate again.
Is that something that you knew about him before then?
No, nobody really.
Is that something Sean would tell you about himself?
Absolutely not. He never bragged about it himself.
Did you hear about his involvement with a particular part of our community when he was a police officer?
Yes, there was a Hispanic lady that came to me and shared her story at the visitation, the same visitation, that I believe she had been assaulted and she was in need of a medical assistance as well as police. My brother made the scene, and even after he could have left, he decided to stay. And my brother was fluent in Spanish as well as several other languages, and he decided to help translate for the Hispanic lady that she understood, that she could fully understand what the paramedic and the EMT were telling her, as well as explaining the whole situation to her and the next steps that she needed to make. And in fact, there was a word or a phrase that he wasn't familiar with, that he didn't know, and he he remembered that he served in the Marine Corps with a gentleman who was Hispanic. He actually lived in California at the time. And the reason I heard about this is because that Marine was at the funeral and shared the same story, that my brother called him. It was in the middle of the night for him. It was maybe 2, 3, 4 a.m. And he woke him up out of bed and asked him, "How do you say this phrase?" And he's, of course, upset that he's being called in the middle of the night. But eventually he gave him the phrase, and it was just so that he could help the lady in the community that he was translating for fully understand everything that was going on.
Did he say, show that same sort of generosity to his family?
Absolutely.
Was there something specific he did for you on your way?
Yes. My wife and I were excited that just through our lives, he wanted to be there for me and step up and be there in a way that others haven't been, in a way. So he decided that he was going to purchase everything that he could off of our wedding gift registry that was not already purchased. He had no idea what a lot of the stuff was that was left unpurchased, nor did I, for that matter. So I think we got 10 boxes all with the same, and we got them, and I heard them rattle, so I picked it up and shook it, and we're trying to figure out what it was, because neither one of us honestly knew what they were. And it turns out they were tiki torches that were just on our registry, so we still have a lot of tiki torches. And he also bought us a lot of throw pillows, and just spatulas, and just anything and everything that wasn't on the wedding registry that was already purchased. He decided that he was going to try to get for me and my wife.
Did, after Sean died, Josh Grimes, who testified here this week and was one of his fellow officers, give you something as a...
He did. He actually gave me, it's called a hat clip. It's made by Bremet, and it had it was pink, and it had a unicorn on it, and it had 364 Delta, which was my brother's radio call sign.
Was there something unique about the unicorn?
Yes. So I had seen some stuff about unicorns on social media and heard some people joking about them with it. So I thought my brother liked unicorns. I didn't understand it. I even, for a wedding, for being my best man, I bought him a gift that had to do with unicorns. And I asked him, "You like unicorns, right?" He's like, "Well, yeah, it's a joke, right?" I didn't know that, but I said, okay. And afterwards, I found out that my brother had a really great sense of humor, and one of the things that he liked to do was, when on the radio with the Memphis Police Department, you have to use the phonetic alphabet when you're spelling something out. So whenever he would say "you" instead of saying "uniform," he would say "unicorn," and it was kind of a joke where he would try to get the dispatchers to respond by saying "unicorn" instead of "uniform."
Well, that story sort of encapsulated the kind of goofy, big personality he had.
Absolutely.
That would be our proof, Sean.
Ms. Gangle, any questions of Mr. Golden?
No questions, Sean.
Both of them want to thank you. And then President Court, I want to offer to you my condolences for the loss of your brother, your family's loss. Ask you to keep your voice up a little bit louder, because I'm sitting about 4 feet from you. I was trained to hear you, and everybody in the courtroom needs to hear you, the court reporter, in particular viewers. I need to keep your voice up a little bit louder, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. I don't want to give you my condolences for your loss, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The state has one more witness they would call the victim in time.
Yes,
The state would
ma'am.
call Jacoba Boyd.
Jacoby Boyd, please. Welcome forward, please, sir. Come right up to the circle, please, and once you get there, raise your right hand, please. Board, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Stand on the board. Have a seat here as officer board. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Bird, you may proceed.
I apologize, officer. Can you say your first and last name and spell out the court for her again?
Jacoba Boyd, Jacoba. Last
Did you, other than being on the force with Sean, did you know Sean as your friend?
yes.
How long did you know Sean?
It was 4 years before that. 5 years, if I'm mistaken.
How did you guys get to know each other?
I saw him in passing when we were in the military, and when I saw him here, I recognized him. And we spoke, made a connection, and I talked to him and convinced him to join the police department.
And what did being a police officer mean to Sean?
I mean, everything to him. I mean, he was, more focused on the community and what people needed, more so than, actually appeasing the police department. He did it because he had a sense of duty.
And after Sean was killed, did you hear from members of the area that he served?
Yes, I heard from several members of the community.
And did you hear about the impact that he had made on the community as an officer?
Yes. There was an older gentleman that approached me in the store. He told me that, Officer Bolton would come by and see him, check on him, make sure he had everything that he needed. There's also Hispanic communities, like in the Cottonwood apartments. There are a couple of Hispanics that told me he was the neighborhood officer, that he would come through, he would talk to the kids and, speak to the older people there. And, he was just always neighborhood. He was smiling, always waving, talking to the people that's out there.
Was that sort of his approach to how he approached his work as a police officer?
Yes.
And I know you were there that night, and there were lots of people there that night who responded to that scene. Have some of those fellow friends and officers of yours left the force now?
Yeah, some of them was traumatized. It was a pretty chaotic scene. Some of them have since left the department, and they couldn't deal with the constant trauma of constantly thinking about it and whatnot. So a few of them have left the department.
So something you think about every day?
Of course.
Have you ever become?
Mr. Ganduli, any questions of Officer Board?
No, Your Honor.
Will you step down from the witness stand and not discuss this testimony with anyone who will call you back in 3 minutes? Thank you, sir. Let's step. Ms. Bird, State, contemplate any additional victim impact treatment?
No, Your Honor, that would be our previous person in the
Mr. Ganduli or Ms. Castley, Ms. Hall, any objections to the proposed victim impact that has been taken outside of the presence of the jury?
No, Your Honor.
For the record, the court finds pursuant to Say versus Nesbitt, NESBIT, 978 Southwest 2nd, page 872, 1998, Tennessee Supreme Court opinion. In the federal case, Payne, PAYNE versus Tennessee, in 501 U.S. 808, 1991 United States Supreme Court opinion, that this testimony is in fact being limited to showing that Officer Board was in fact a caring, that he was a loving son, brother, that he in fact cared about his community, was a neighborhood police officer and checked on people in that neighborhood, that he was in fact a military veteran, excited about being a police officer because he wanted to continue to serve his community. And this court does find that this victim impact information provides circumstances surrounding the victim's death and how those circumstances have affected family, friends, and other folks emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And this court jury as proper victim impact evidence will in fact inform the jury that this evidence is not the same as an aggravating circumstance. Are both sides ready to proceed otherwise? Yes, sir. Yes, Smith, you bring the jury with sir?
No, sir.
Judge,
Yes, sir.
possible turn the microphone up or something. I don't know.
It is, we can attempt to turn it up more, and for the press, I hope, apologize for that. But we'll try it up a little bit more. Yes, sir. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. I'll put those folks in there without your notebooks. Would you like that to retrieve those notebooks for you? Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, you found Mr. Wilbourn guilty of first-degree murder. We're now entering into a sentencing hearing. I want to apologize for you for the delay. There's some legal issues that we had to take up outside of your presence, so that's the reason for the delay.